Hey everyone, in this video we're going to be talking about the Scandinavian defense for the black pieces, which begins after white plays the move e4. We will respond with the move d5. So this is immediately striking at the center and forcing white to make a decision. What are they going to do about this pawn tension? So white has a couple of options here as far as what to do with this pawn. They can capture it right away, which is the best move, and we'll talk about the most in this video. They also have options of leaving it here and defending it, or not, as we'll see in some gambit lines, but they can also push it forward, and we'll start with this one. So immediately in this position, we want to play the move c5, and this is to prevent white from playing the move d4. Now, it doesn't actually prevent this. They can still play the move d4. We'll just take it. And then after we do that, white just has this pawn that's a little too close for comfort on our side of the board, and we will be able to pretty quickly surround it and hopefully target and win it. So going back to this position, we want to essentially develop our pieces in a way that is putting a lot of pressure on this d4 square so that white is a little less comfortable eventually playing this move. They can build it up pretty quickly by just starting with the move c3 and then next planning to play the move d4. But in a lot of cases, your opponent's actually just going to start developing their pieces. In this case, it's a great idea to bring out our light squared bishop, pinning it to the queen. Our next plan is to continue development. So let's say white plays this move. This is a pretty common move in the database. We'll just bring our knight out to c6, again, putting lots of pressure on this center. And a lot of games in the lower rating ranges continue with white castling here, which is an immediate mistake. We just win a pawn after capturing this knight. White captures back, and that has removed the defender of the lonely pawn in the center. We can now take that, and we are happy. We are a pawn up. We'll continue our development, get castled, and life is great. So going back to this position, let's just run through really quickly what happens if white leaves this pawn in the center and instead tries to defend it with a move like knight to c3. Well, this is great for us. We can immediately push forward, take more space in the center, and make this knight move twice. That's a really important thing in the opening. You usually don't want to be moving your pieces twice, and so by forcing our opponent to do that, we can pretty quickly gain a very strong pawn center. So what happens in this position if white defends this pawn with the d pawn? Well, we will be very happy to see this because this probably means that white doesn't really know what they're doing. We can capture this pawn, and after white captures back, we can just simply take the queen on the other side of the board, and it's only defended by the king. The king has to take it, and now this king, because it has moved, has lost castling rights. So we can very quickly play moves like e5, get our pieces developed, get castled. This castle will probably come with check because the rook will be on the d file, while our opponent is just going to take so much time to get their king tucked away to safety. So now let's go to the move that you will most often see in the Scandinavian defense, and that is white capturing the pawn on d5. Now, we can recapture with the queen. One of the drawbacks that a lot of people see with the Scandinavian is that it is bringing your queen out early, but it is fine if you know what you're doing and as long as you're not going to get it trapped. Easier said than done, right? So after this move, there's a couple of options white has. Usually, and the best move is bringing the knight out to c3. It's a developing move, but it attacks our queen. So we have a few options for where to move our queen. The most common, and I think the best, is moving it over to a5. We can also move it all the way back, and this comes with some tricks and traps of its own, but moving it all the way back, just at least in my opinion, it just looks very passive. White already has development. They can continue developing. They already have two pieces out. We moved our queen twice, and it's better, I think, in my opinion at least, to at least keep the option open of having traps along this rank and give white a little bit more to think about. But you can play this way, it's totally fine. There's also other moves that have been played by grandmasters, giving checks. It's usually not so good just because our queen will get kicked around even more. And so like I said, we're going to look mostly at this move queen to a5. So the best way to play this for white is to put a pawn in the center immediately with the move d4. We can continue development with our knight out to f6. And now what if white goes after our queen? Notice looking through the knight and at our queen. A good way to give our queen a quick escape route is to just play the move c6. So our queen can get tucked back here on c7. So as we move forward, again, always just keeping an eye on this knight. As soon as it moves, alarm bells going off. But most often white will wait to do this until a little bit later, and so we'll have a chance to continue development, as will our opponent, usually moving the knight out here. We can just immediately pin this knight by moving the bishop to g4. We can also play bishop to f5. That's also a perfectly fine move and often a better one as you get a little bit more advanced because your bishop will just get kicked around as people know what they're doing. But this is just a good move. It helps a lot with tactics in the future. For example, if white were to ever play this bishop out here, you have to remember that our queen is covering this 5th rank. And the board is really big, so a lot of times this is a blind spot for players. So in this particular case, we can just take this knight, removing the defender of this bishop, and after white takes back, we'll just simply be up a piece. But of course, better for white here is to develop their bishop, either, to this square or this square, it doesn't really matter. Now that our light squared bishop is out, we can play the move e6 because it's not blocking in our bishop anymore. And white will typically castle. This is a good time to move this knight out here. So again, after this knight moves, the main threat that this knight will hold is, of course, the bishop attacking our queen, but also capturing this knight and doubling the pawns. So it's usually best to get this knight out as soon as possible so that when this knight comes here and captures, we can refill with another piece instead of with a pawn. So we can even bring this knight out to d7 and move earlier if we'd like, but it is important to get our light squared bishop out because look at all of our pawns on the light squares. Like, it's otherwise going to be impossible to get this light squared bishop out, so this is a very important order of business. And now say rook to e1, we can continue with developing our final piece. Usually putting the bishop on e7 is just a good square for it, and we will castle on the next move. We can castle long, but the problem is these pawns are just a little dicey in front of the king over here, so it's usually best to castle short, unless a little bit earlier in the game our opponent doesn't take the full center. And obviously there are a lot of tricks and traps that I just didn't have time to go over in just 7 minutes, but if you're interested in this opening, I definitely recommend looking them up. There's actually a lot of fun traps for both black and white in the Scandinavian, so it's a really fun opening to play, and I hope you enjoyed learning about it. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. It really helps me out a lot, and I'll see you soon.